I noticed something was wrong the moment my son-in-law walked past me in the kitchen without saying a word. Not a good morning, not even a glance. He just opened the refrigerator, took out the orange juice, the good kind, the one I had bought at Kroger 2 days before, poured himself a tall glass, and walked back down the hall to the bedroom where my daughter was still sleeping. I stood at the counter with my coffee going cold in my hands. This was my house. I need to say that clearly because I think sometimes I forgot it myself. The house on Clover Ridge Drive in Knoxville, Tennessee, the one with the cream-colored shutters and the Japanese maple out front that my husband Gerald planted the year our daughter was born, that house was mine. Gerald and I had paid it off 11 years before he passed. It was the one thing in this world that was completely, undeniably ours. And then ours became mine. And I spent 2 years learning to be alone inside it before my daughter Pamela called and said she and her husband Trace were having a hard time. "Just until we get back on our feet, Mama," she said. 6 months, maybe 8. That was 3 years ago. I want to be careful about how I describe Trace, because I know he is the father of my grandchildren, and I know Pamela loves him, and I do not think he is a bad man at the core. I think he is a man who was never told no. I think somewhere between his own mother doing everything for him and marrying a woman whose mother would also do everything for him, he simply never developed the muscle you need to carry your own weight. He had a job. He worked in sales for a flooring company, and he made decent enough money when he applied himself. But there was always a reason the money ran out. Always something that came up. The truck needed new tires. His buddy had tickets to the Vols game, and it would be rude not to go. Pamela wanted to take the kids somewhere nice for spring break. It was never nothing. It was always something. And somehow, quietly, without anyone ever sitting me down and asking, I had become the floor beneath all of it. I paid the electric bill because Trace forgot to set up the auto pay and they got a shut-off notice. I bought the groceries because Pamela said they were a little short this week, and then a little short became every week, and then every week became just how things were. I covered the car insurance when Trace let it lapse, not once, but twice, because I could not have my grandchildren riding around uninsured. I put my name on a credit card for them when Pamela said they couldn't qualify on their own, and I told myself it was temporary. I told myself a lot of things were temporary. The night everything changed, it started with something small. That is how it usually goes. Pamela had made dinner, a real dinner, which was not something that happened every evening. She had picked up ribeye steaks from the butcher counter at the grocery store, the thick-cut ones, the kind Gerald used to save for special occasions. I had come in from the garden around 6, still in my muddy gloves, and I could smell them cooking from the back door. I thought maybe something good had happened. A promotion, maybe. A reason to celebrate. I washed my hands and sat down at my own kitchen table. Pamela set a plate in front of Trace. Steak, roasted potatoes, green beans with almonds. She set a plate in front of herself. The same. She set the kids' plates, cut their meat for them, got them their milk. And then she went back to the counter and brought out one more plate and set it in front of me. It was the leftover pot roast from Sunday, 3 days old. She had put it in the microwave, and there was a dry gray ring around the edges where it had reheated unevenly. I looked at my plate. I looked at the steak on Trace's plate, which still had a little pink in the center, just the way he liked it. Nobody said anything. Trace was already cutting his meat. Pamela sat down and asked the kids about their day at school. The little one, my grandson, started talking about something that happened at recess, and everyone laughed, and dinner went on. I ate maybe 4 bites. I said I wasn't very hungry. I excused myself and went to my room and sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor for a very long time. I did not cry. I was past crying by then, I think. What I felt was something quieter than sadness and more certain than anger. It was a kind of clarity. The kind that only comes when something so plainly wrong happens in front of you that there is no way left to explain it away. I had been explaining things away for 3 years. Trace couldn't help that he was raised differently. Pamela was stretched thin between the kids and part-time work. Things would settle down. They just needed more time. I told myself these things the way you press a bandage over something that needs stitches, firmly, with both hands, hoping pressure will be enough. But sitting on my bed that night, I stopped pressing. I started thinking instead. I thought about the credit card with my name on it, the one I had checked last Thursday because something had felt off. The balance was $4,600. I had not charged a single thing to it. I thought about the home equity line of credit that Trace had mentioned casually 3 weeks ago. Just mentioned it the way he mentioned things, like he was thinking out loud, saying it might be smart to tap into some of that equity to consolidate their debt. I had said I would think about it. I had not thought about it, not really. I had hoped it would go away. I thought about my granddaughter Lena, who was 9 years old and the most clear-eyed person in this house. Lena, who had knocked on my door one Sunday morning last month and sat beside me on the bed and said very matter-of-factly, "Grandma, why do you always give Daddy money when he asks?" I had not known what to say. I told her that was just how families helped each other. She had looked at me with those serious brown eyes and said, "But he never helps you back." Then she had gone to make herself a bowl of cereal, and that was that. Out of the mouths of children. I did not sleep much that night. I lay in the dark and I listened to the house settle around me, the tick of the baseboard heater, the sound of the television in the other room where Trace had fallen asleep on the couch again. And I thought about Gerald. I thought about how hard he had worked for this house. 31 years with the city's public works department. He had taken early retirement when his knees gave out, and we had just barely made the last mortgage payment before he did. He used to say, "Lorene, this house is your security. Whatever else happens, you have this house." He said it more than once. I think he knew something I didn't. The way people sometimes do when they are closer to the end than you realize. I thought about what he would say if he could see me now, eating leftover pot roast at my own table. By 4 a.m, I had made up my mind. I got up quietly. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark with a notepad, and I wrote down every account, every card, every financial tie that connected me to my daughter and her husband. I had been meticulous about keeping records. That was one thing Gerald had taught me, and I knew exactly where every document was. My binder was in the bottom drawer of my desk in the bedroom, the same binder I had organized after Gerald passed, the one with the tabs for insurance, banking, property, investments. I got it out and I went through it page by page. The picture that emerged was not pretty. The credit card with my name, $4,628 balance, all charges made by Trace or Pamela. The car insurance policy that listed me as secondary holder, past due notice tucked in behind the February statement. A utility account that had been transferred into my name when Trace had a judgment against him from a previous landlord. And the equity line application, which I found, still in draft, thank God, on the printer in the little alcove off the kitchen. He had been filling it out. He had filled in my name, my social security number, my date of birth. He had not asked me. He had just started filling it out. I sat with that paper in my hands for a long time. Then I put everything back in the binder, closed it, and got dressed. It was just after 6 when I pulled out of the driveway. The sky was the color of ash at the edges, starting to go pink over the ridge. The Japanese maple was just beginning to bud. I drove to the First Tennessee branch on Kingston Pike, the one that opened at 8:30. I was there 40 minutes early, and I sat in the parking lot and listened to the radio, an old gospel station, the kind Gerald used to have on Sunday mornings, and I waited. The banker who helped me was a young woman named Christine. She had a tidy desk and reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and she did not seem surprised by anything I told her, which I appreciated. I explained the credit card situation, and she helped me begin the process of removing it from my name. She explained what documentation I would need. I explained about the equity line draft, and she brought in her manager, a steady-voiced man who walked me through how to place a freeze on my credit with all three bureaus, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, so that nothing could be opened in my name without my direct, in-person authorization. It took about 2 hours. When I walked out of that bank, the sun was fully up and the air smelled like cut grass and morning. I sat in my car in the parking lot and I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 3 years. Then I drove to a diner I had always liked, a small place near the university that made biscuits from scratch, and I sat at the counter and ordered a full breakfast, eggs over easy, thick-cut bacon, a biscuit with butter and fig jam, and I ate every bite. I didn't go home until almost noon. When I came through the front door, Trace was in the kitchen making a sandwich. He heard me and didn't turn around. "You were out early," he said. "I had some things to take care of," I said. He nodded and took his sandwich to the living room. It was not until that evening that I found out his card had been declined at the gas station. He came home from work with that tight look on his face he got when something had gone wrong, and he went straight to the bedroom. I could hear him and Pamela talking in low, urgent voices. I sat on the back porch with a glass of iced tea, and I watched the light change in the garden, and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Peace, I think. A very specific kind of peace. The next morning, Pamela came to find me. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table, and she looked tired in a way that was more than just not enough sleep. She looked tired the way people look when they have been carrying something they should have put down a long time ago. She said Trace was upset. She said he didn't understand what I had done or why. She said she knew things hadn't been perfect, but she didn't think it was fair to do all this without warning. I let her finish. I had known this conversation was coming, and I had thought about what I wanted to say. I did not want to yell. I did not want to list every grievance like evidence in a trial. I just wanted to tell her the truth. "Pamela," I said, "your husband had an equity line application on this printer with my Social Security number on it. He hadn't asked me. He was just filling it out." She was quiet for a moment. "I didn't know about that," she said. "I know you didn't," I said. "That's part of what worries me." She looked down at her hands. She has Gerald's hands, long fingers, the same shape at the knuckles. I have always loved her hands. "I don't want to lose you," she said, very quietly. "You're not losing me," I said. "But things have to change, not tomorrow. Starting right now, today, they have to change." We talked for almost 2 hours, real talking, the kind we hadn't done in a long time. I told her about the pot roast. I told her that might seem like a small thing, but it wasn't a small thing to me. It was the night I understood how invisible I had become inside my own home. She cried a little. I didn't, but my voice went tight in a way I couldn't quite control. I told her I loved her, and I loved those children, and I was not going anywhere. But I was also not going to go back to the way things had been. Trace took longer. He didn't speak to me directly for most of a week. I did not chase after him. I went about my days, my garden, my Tuesday morning Bible study group, my standing Wednesday lunch with my friend Vera Jean from church, and I let him process whatever he needed to process. When he finally came to me, it was a Thursday evening, and he found me on the back porch where I seem to do most of my living these days. He stood in the doorway for a moment, and then he came and sat in the other chair. He looked out at the yard for a while, without saying anything. I have never been a woman who rushes silence, so I just waited. "I didn't think of it as taking from you," he said finally. "I think I stopped thinking about it much at all. You were always there, and it was always okay, and He stopped. He pressed his hands together between his knees. That's not an excuse. I know that's not an excuse. No, I said, it's not. I'm sorry, Lorene. He used my name, which he almost never did. I mean that. I looked at him. He was not a bad man. I had always known that. He was a man who had never been made to be accountable. And there is a difference, though the damage can look the same from the outside. Then show me, I said. That's the only way I'll know. It has been 4 months now. A lot has changed, and some things haven't, and I think that is just how life actually goes. Not a clean before and after, but a slow, effortful shift. Trace has set up automatic payments from his own account for his share of the household expenses. We sat down, the three of us, and we made an actual written agreement. His idea, I'll give him that, about what each person contributes each month. He has not asked me for money since that Thursday on the porch. Some weeks I can see it is hard for him. I don't say anything. That is not my job anymore. Pamela is different in ways I am still noticing. She calls me into the kitchen sometimes now when she's cooking, just to talk, the way we used to when she was young and I was teaching her how to make things. Last Sunday she made pot roast and she set my plate first and she gave me the best of it without saying a word about it. I thought about saying something and then I thought better of it. Some things don't need to be named to be understood. Lena still knocks on my bedroom door on Sunday mornings. Last week she climbed up beside me on the bed and asked if I would teach her how to balance a checkbook. She is 9 years old. I told her absolutely yes, and we would start this very afternoon. She got that satisfied look she gets when something is settled. I will teach her everything I know, how to keep records, how to say no with love in your voice, how to know the difference between helping someone and quietly disappearing underneath their life. Gerald always said this house was my security. He was right, though I think he meant it more narrowly than I've come to understand it. The house matters, the equity and the deed and the paid-off mortgage. Those things matter, but the security I needed most wasn't in any binder or any drawer. It was the kind that comes from finally, after a very long time, remembering that I deserve to eat at my own table. I keep thinking about that plate of pot roast, 3 days old, gray around the edges, set in front of me at my own table while everyone else had steak. At the time I just said I wasn't hungry and went to my room. But I think about it now and I understand something I couldn't quite see then. That moment had been a long time coming. Not because my daughter or her husband were born cruel, but because I had quietly taught them, over 3 years of small surrenders, that my comfort was optional. That is the hardest thing to sit with. Not what they did, but what I allowed. Every time I covered a bill without being asked, every time I said, don't worry about it, when I should have said, this isn't right, I was writing a set of rules for how I expected to be treated. And the rule I kept writing, over and over, was, she doesn't mind. She'll be fine. She always handles it. What changed wasn't Trace or even Pamela. What changed was me. I had to get honest, genuinely, painfully honest, about what was actually happening in my own house. That took something I hadn't been giving myself, clear thinking. Not the kind clouded by wanting to keep the peace, or not wanting to seem difficult, or being afraid that if I drew a line someone would stop loving me. Real clear thinking, the kind that looks at a credit application filled out with your social security number without your knowledge and calls it exactly what it is. Once I saw clearly, I had to decide what to do with what I saw. That took a different kind of strength, not the strength of confrontation, but the quieter, harder kind. The kind that gets up at 4 a.m, makes coffee, sits at a kitchen table with a notepad, and works through every account and every document one by one. The kind that drives to the bank before it opens and sits in the parking lot, listening to the radio until the doors unlock, acting when it would have been so much easier to wait one more day, to give it one more chance, to tell myself maybe I was overreacting. I wasn't overreacting. I was finally reacting at the right time. And then there's Lena, 9 years old, and she had already seen what I kept refusing to see. She asked me why I always gave her daddy money when he asked, and why he never helped me back. I didn't have a good answer, but that question sat in me like a seed, and by the night of that dinner, it had grown into something I couldn't ignore anymore. I am teaching Lena how to balance a checkbook now. But I think what I really want to teach her, what I hope she takes from all of this, is something less about numbers. It's about knowing your own worth clearly enough to protect it. It's about being good to the people you love without disappearing into their needs. It's about having the backbone to act on what you know is right, even when it costs you something, even when the people involved are people you would do anything for. Those three things: a good heart, a clear mind, and the will to act on both. I didn't have all of them at once for a long time. I had the heart. I was missing the other two. I have them all now. Gerald would be glad.